From VQR and the Center for Media and Citizenship, this is episode 12 of Circle of Willis, where I chat with social neuroscientist Jay Van Bavel about the effect of moralizing language on political debates, how scientists, or really how we all, use social media to settle disputes, and how a kid from the sticks of northern Alberta manages to become a renowned social scientist at New York University. Hey everyone, it's Jim Cohn. Yep, this is still my podcast, Circle of Willis. I got Jay Van Bavel on the show. Jay is an assistant professor of psychology and neural science at New York University and an affiliate scholar at the Stern School of Business in their management and organizations program. Jay's work on group identity, social motivation, moral values, and political beliefs have rocketed him to the national and even international spotlight as one of social science's most influential young scholars. More and more, Jay's work and perspective has seen him working with and for such popular outlets as Scientific American and the New York Times. So he's also something of a public intellectual, which is, I think, kind of a tough trick for a scientist to pull off. Anyway, I didn't really know Jay that well before our conversation. We'd never met before in person, though we'd had a fair amount of interaction on social media. And social media is, in fact, a large part of what we talk about here. That and the effect of moralizing language on political debates. Spoiler, moralizing language and social media interact in important ways, so pay attention to that. But we also talk a bit about Jay's personal story, his journey from first-generation college student from northern Alberta, that's in Canada, folks, to the hustle and bustle of Manhattan. It's a good story. It's a Canadian story. And Canadian stories always cheer me up. That's partly because I have a lot of Canadian roots of my own, but it's also because Canada is a little bit funny to me, just about all the time. I don't necessarily want to deconstruct why that is, but it must have something to do with hockey and meese. All right, I'm momentarily blanking on the plural form of moose, and I'm feeling too pressed for time to stop and look it up. Moose? I think it's just moose for both the plural and singular. But whatever. See what I mean? Canada's kind of funny. Anyway, whatever your tastes in intellectual stimulation or scientific biography, this conversation delivers. So I'm going to stop rambling now and just let you hear from the man himself. Ready? Here's Jay Van Bavel. So how are things going?
Good.
Yeah? What are you guys working on these days? What's the sort of latest stuff? What's the hot off the presses kind of thing?
Okay, I'll tell you something that we just resubmitted.
Okay.
I'm excited about. We analyzed Twitter data.
Yeah.
And it's my first ever big data project.
Oh, yeah.
And we were looking at whether moral language is more likely to go viral.
Moral language? What's moral language?
So, we used databases that exist of different moral words. So, the word hate.
Words. Like hate is a moral word?
Yeah. Well, it's moralized.
Because it's a moral judgment.
It's moralized.
Yeah.
So it's morally negative.
I see.
Virtue would be a morally positive word.
Okay.
And it turns out, in particular, moral emotions, if you have them in your tweets, this is a bit of advice for you, Jim. When you get back on Twitter.
Oh, shit.
Every moral emotional
Twitter
word you have
world
increases the probability that your message will get retweeted by about 20%.
20%?
Yeah.
That's a bad thing. Don't you think that's a bad thing?
So here's why it's bad.
Tell us why it's bad.
Okay, the reason why it's bad is part of the paper is that what ends up happening is if you plot, we have this way of inferring people's political belief system based on who they follow and who follows them, developed by political scientists. And if you plot all the retweet networks, there's two giant clusters, and it turns out it's liberals and conservatives. And if you tweet moral language, it only gets shared within your ideological cluster.
So it gets retweeted a bunch within your group.
Yeah, so you have like an echo chamber effect, really, which is liberals. The moment you start using moral language, it only gets shared by people who are like-minded. The problem is that then that creates like group cohesion and clustering and polarization. If you don't use moral language, it's just as likely to get shared by people from the left and from the right. And so,
but it won't get shared as much.
It won't get shared as much, yeah. So it's a trade-off.
Oh, Jesus.
If you want something to go viral, you got to talk to your in-group. I mean, these were, in fairness, political topics like same-sex marriage, climate change, gun control.
Which, these things come up on Twitter.
Yeah,
right?
Occasionally. I was thinking about the replication crisis being a case where I bet if we plotted the moralized language there, you might end up with two clusters as well.
Yeah, we were talking about this last night. That whole the whole infusion of moralized language into that whole debate drives me up the wall.
Yeah. Well, it means that moral language, there's research on this that came out recently that it's a signal. It's a signal to you're using moral language on a topic. It's a signal that you're a good group member.
That you're a good group member.
But what it does is it can actually lead people, with the intent of signaling they're a good group member, can actually make them take more extreme stances than they actually believe in.
Right. So I mean, I don't even know if we characterize that from the perspective of the group itself as a trade-off. Right, mm-hmm. Because you're whipping up the group into groupishness.
Yeah,
right?
I love the word whip. I mean, that makes it like that's what you call the person for a political party who lines everybody up for a vote. Right? It's like that? They go around twisting arms and bending people behind the scenes and making sure they follow
using
the party line.
Moralistic language.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Or we will make sure that you don't get reelected in your district.
Do you think that the risk there is that by sort of whipping up your group into getting your in-group in line, that very process can put your group at risk for being less influential out in competing with other groups?
Potentially, if people start to react against you because they feel like you're pushing forth a group interest, or if they see you as an outgroup, they might react against what you're saying, even if it's a legitimately reasonable claim.
Right.
You see that in politics all the time.
Yeah.
It's that I think Obama's Healthcare Act is a good example of that. It was actually an idea from a right-wing think tank.
Yeah.
But the moment it was coming from Obama, Republicans reacted negatively against it. And so that he was hoping, I think, that he took some ideas from the right. They might actually be receptive and get on board. And you can imagine that playing out in negative ways scientifically, too. If I have an agenda item that I think is really compelling, but if you see me as an outgroup member, you react against it because maybe you distrust me or a way of signaling to other group members your loyalty, and that means it might be hard to broker a compromise.
Right. It seems to me that I sort of can understand that in the context of political battles, because politics has always sort of been that way in some ways. Although, the whole James Madison project in constructing the way that the American government works is to constrain that, to keep that from being effective, those kinds of emotional appeals, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I wonder about is how it's playing out in scientific communication these days. I mean, one of the reasons that I'm doing this, talking with people while the recorder's on, is because it seems like, and I don't know whether this is really true or not, but it just seems to me from my own experience that the social media environment somehow encourages the moralistic language, or at least if it's not specifically moralistic, it's language that whips people into line, right?
Yeah.
That creates this very groupish kind of. Do you think there's something to that? Do you think that's really true?
I think that there's multiple elements to it. One is Twitter and other social media platforms have a trolling problem. This extends well beyond science, where when people are behind an icon and it's a bit more anonymized, or at least you're not sitting across a table face to face like you would at a conference,
right?
You're much more likely
to
be provocative, to challenge somebody, maybe to say something more egregious or offensive than you otherwise would. So we know that now science is using those technological tools. And it's not surprising as humans we run into some of the same problems.
Right.
So that's not, but it now infuses itself in scientific dialogue. The other thing I think is that, as I was just saying, people probably have a pretty good intuition that certain types of language makes their content go viral. And so think of the reward contingencies on the social media.
Yeah.
It's retweets, likes,
yeah,
shares,
exactly. Right.
Facebook,
It's like
our blog
Skinner.
views.
It's like the ghost of Skinner coming
Yeah.
in.
And you're getting these little hits
Yeah.
every time you
Right.
like open your phone or you have these applications open. I get them too. And it's like,
I've turned off all notifications because otherwise I go crazy.
Yeah, it's like you get a little beep or
Yeah.
jiggle even in your pocket
Yeah.
or something
Oh,
like
God.
that.
Help
And it
us
means
all.
like rewards are coming in. And so I think that there is an incentive structure to using the type of language that actually erodes debate.
Yeah.
And it's also like, we know this like with BuzzFeed and these types of places use like all these little hooks and strategies to catch your interest, and oftentimes they're subtly deceptive to get you to click the link so they get advertising dollars.
Right.
Scientists are susceptible to the same things. They might not have advertising dollars coming in for their blog, but they're checking how many blog hits they've got.
Sure.
And they're getting
course,
a
yeah.
sense of what works
I
and what
do.
doesn't work.
It drives me crazy. My one stupid blog post I ever wrote is already like easily the most widely read thing I've ever put out there. Either that or I'm crazy. I mean, I get these stats.
Yeah.
You know, it's all the time. It just keeps coming in.
How many times has it been read? I'm totally curious.
Something like 17,000 times.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
The next most read thing I've ever written can't be more than 500.
So you have like an order of magnitude,
Yeah.
more influence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a scientist, we all are trained to try to get people to see our work, to hear our ideas, right? And the typical medium going through all the bullshit of peer review and the aggravation of reviewer 3 or whatever. It takes a year to get your precious thing out and then nobody reads it. It's like, Jesus, it's so punishing. And so now we've got blogging and Facebook and Twitter, and we can just like put the thing out there and immediately get this feedback that people are looking at it or getting impressions or whatever the hell it is. I don't understand half the metrics.
I think the other thing you've touched on that's interesting as well is the reward structure is immediate versus long term. And we know that humans are pretty terrible at delayed gratification.
Yes.
And temporal discounting.
I can't speak for anyone else.
Yeah. And so it's almost like the type of feedback we get, not only is it quantifiable, and it's orders of magnitude greater in terms of impact, the number of people who read your writing, but it's immediate.
Yeah.
And so you have almost like, if you could engineer something that triggers like all these kind of primitive cues in the human brain, and there's social feedback too. It's social reward, which we know is like worse than cocaine for us in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like belongingness is pretty a fundamental human need. It triggers all the primitive reward systems.
Yeah, to have people around us who are part of our tribe or whatever. Yeah. Well, so it makes me wonder a little bit whether social media, I'm going to say something kind of provocative here, but I don't know, whether social media is sort of like one of the new problems for scientific discourse. Now, a lot of people that we know, they think that social media is like the future of scientific discourse, and that it's precisely because of its immediate feedback that it's so useful. So I wonder about that.
So let's play with that. I mean,
it sure has worked out well in politics, hasn't it?
I think that social media is good and bad.
Okay.
I mean, I don't see it as a net. I must see it as a net positive if you judge my behavior.
Well,
because I'm on Twitter
I
way
wouldn't
too
say
much.
that about me too, and I don't think that's a verdict in favor of those media.
Okay,
I think
true.
That's
It's
maybe
addictive.
a verdict of my own sort of personal weaknesses, right?
Yeah. So I have a colleague over at the business school here, Adam Alter, who last week or so just came out with a book called Irresistible, which is about how technologies are
bought it, Adam
addictive.
Alter.
Yeah, Adam. So I'll give Adam a plug.
Yeah.
And we are humans. Scientists are humans. That's something we often forget, right?
Yeah.
We act like we're objective,
Right.
impartial observers of nature. And the fact is that we're human. So we have the same sensitivities and weaknesses that other humans have. And so it's easy to get drawn into these types of issues. And we should be mindful of human nature when we're trying to like create systems and technology that are going to help science.
Right.
I tell my students that the way that scientists disseminate information, most of them, is woefully outdated. It was like these ideas of going to a conference, paying $2,000 for your flight, your registration, your membership, your hotel for 4 days, your food. your poster printing costs.
Yeah,
to go stand in front of a poster. And I've had posters where 2 people have come by.
Yeah.
My best poster of all time had about 50 people come by. And
Oh, wow.
Man, I was living large that day. It was like right during the lunch session. And
This is at like SPSP.
SPSP, yeah. But it takes like
well.
a day or 2 to put a poster together and, 4 days to go
I know.
set it up. Or you could write a blog post of that exact same project. You can actually get multiple people to edit it the same way, and it goes online, and it's more public. People who couldn't afford to go to the conference or were interested in that topic but don't normally go to that conference can see it. They can give you comments. You can have a better dialogue. So from that perspective, it's way more efficient economically.
Sure, no question. No question it's more efficient economically. I mean, the investment that you have to put in, as you laid out plain, comparing the making a poster and going to a conference versus writing up something and putting it online. Even if you do have multiple editors, the investment difference is huge.
Yeah.
What a net savings.
Yeah.
I do wonder what the trade-off actually is, though.
Yeah.
I don't think that people are interacting. I don't want to overstate this too much, but the kind of the way that we're sort of shaped by natural selection to behave with each other. There's another thing about blogs and social media and things like that I think I see in my colleagues and that is the sort of need to demonstrate our cleverness.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That we all want to be like a little H.L. Mencken or Mark Twain or something when we're writing about somebody's silly stats conclusion or something. We have to not just say what we think. We have to say it in a very clever way because we're using written English or whatever. But you don't worry about that so much when you're sitting around talking with somebody, at a conference. I think
it's multiple things. One is that you conform to the norms of the medium of communication that you're using. And so
well put.
When I'm writing an article for a scientific journal, I take all of that stuff out. Even if it starts with something interesting, it ends up becoming a rather boring document, right?
Yeah.
Or one of my colleagues would be like, I'm uncomfortable, making that quip. Or at best, you're allowed to put it in the footnote.
Right.
Of course, it's much more fun to read your colleagues when they actually have a little bit of life in their writing.
Yeah.
But with blogs, we write in a way that's normal for blogs. And so we're reading blogs online all the time that are outside academia, and there's a different set of norms about how to communicate. And we conform our thinking and our expressions to that medium.
And it's more sort of hip.
It's more
funny and informal.
And I have to say, they're more fun to read.
Completely. I know. Yeah. They are. I'm not disputing any of that, but I wonder if that's part of the problem too. I mean, look, I don't really feel strongly about any of these positions. I really don't. But I sort of feel like for some reason voicing them this morning.
Okay, so let me play this out. So I've been the advocate for blogs and social media. So let me push back on my own arguments. So here's some of the trade-offs. One of the trade-offs, I think, is that for very junior people, I actually think that blogs could be more harmful than helpful for multiple reasons. Sure, it can get their name out, but their papers are very carefully curated by their advisors, reviewers, editors, their lab members, friends, colleagues. Their blog thoughts, almost by definition, are not curated. And so they're throwing something out there. And from a faculty member who's been in the field for 5 years or 10 years, they've got, hopefully, enough criticism over the time. They probably know what the landmines are and what they can claim and can't claim.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody who's new to the field might not realize some of these landmines they're stepping into. And so it's in their best interest to have more curated content. When I think of my ideas and my first drafts of papers that I sent to my advisor in grad school, they came back covered in red ink. Will vouch for that.
Yeah.
I was a terrible writer and not the best thinker, and that's why I was doing my PhD, right? And I'm still evolving my thinking all the time, but I will guarantee you the quality of what I would write today in a blog is 10 times better than what I would have written as a third-year graduate student.
Sure.
And so I, for one, am grateful some of my initial submissions of papers weren't accepted as is.
Right.
And that they either got thoroughly torn apart and I had to go back to the drawing board, or else I had to carefully revise them.
Yeah.
And so I would not want a public record of my terrible thinking.
Process.
I'm really grateful that process.
Becoming a writer. Right.
Yeah. So, and also the other thing about blogs, I'll say this, something I do on Twitter. There's an app that deletes all my tweets that are more than 6 months old.
There is.
There is an app. And so every time I tweet something, 6 months from now, it would just be automatically deleted.
Huh.
And the reason for that is because when you're engaging in conversation in social media, it's often in a context.
Right.
So you're saying something in light of a debate that's happening right now, which is what makes it fun and relevant and engaging.
Yeah.
But looking back on it in 2 years, it might, out of context, it might look offensive or inappropriate or at the very minimum be misconstrued. Or wrong. And so I actually intentionally have that because the types of comments I make on social media are not curated in the same way my articles are. And they haven't gone through the review process. There's a thought I had in light of some debate that's going on that makes sense to all the people in that debate at that moment.
Right. Or to you in that moment.
Or to me in that moment. And I don't expect it to stand the test of time or to make sense outside of that context. And I've seen this with some people where they've said something and people have gone back through a bunch of their old comments and pulled out stuff that looked bad in retrospect, but maybe at the time didn't seem that bad.
Well, I mean, this is part of what we're learning about the medium, right? Mm-hmm. Over time too, is that when Twitter's first out, when I first start using Twitter, I'm being really flippant all the time. Yeah. Because it just doesn't seem serious to me.
Totally.
It's
Same
just
here.
not a serious medium. It's just for bullshitting with people who want to bullshit back. And there's no serious content. I didn't hold myself to any kind of standard of seriousness when I'm first using it. Then I went through a phase where I'm like writing clever aphorisms, and trying to impress my colleagues with my sheer cleverness. Mm-hmm. And that was, God, that's so embarrassing. It's horrible. I can't even
You look like you're trying too hard.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. And then it's just like posting articles or whatever. And then the debates about the reproducibility.
The great reproducibility debate.
And so I guess now I'm sort of back. I've sort of come full circle in a way where I'm not behaving like a jackass as much as I used to. But I, once again, can't take it very seriously. I just can't. I can't do it. I'm as liable now to publish, to post a picture of my dog as I am to
I think it was a video of a panda that you posted
video of a
this
panda,
morning.
Right? See, the panda rolling downhill was funny. And I wanted to show that to somebody. I don't even know who's following me, but they're going to see a panda now.
That's what I saw when I woke up this morning, Jim.
See?
Thanks for that.
You got it. That's what Twitter is now.
It's eventually just going to come full circle to Bieber comments and cat videos.
And I think that does suggest something about the medium. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really does. That's kind of what you can do with that kind of medium. It's not about serious conversations. Mm-hmm. It just can't be. Or at least, I mean, I think that some people can do it. I can't figure it out. It's exhausting to me to use that medium. It's chopped up. I have to read people's 1/2/ so that they can complete an actual thought. Yeah. In Twitter in 10 tweets. Forget it.
So one way I like Twitter is saying something, but then linking to some longer article or story you've read or magazine piece.
Yeah, linking to articles is useful, and I have learned about really great research that way.
Yeah. And I like
it for that.
And I have a curated list of people who are interesting and I follow, and I learn about things way outside my normal scope because they're good curators.
Yeah.
What it's terrible for, that I agree with, is debate. Because you can't provide context or qualification. The type of things that are normally part of the scientific dialogue is I acknowledge 3 points, but I'm making a 4th point over here.
Yep.
And then you're like, okay, you've acknowledged my 3 points, let's drill down on that 4th.
Right.
But if I have to get immediately to my criticism of you and I can't affirm the shared ground, we end up shouting past one another and we both get frustrated, it up escalates. And so I've really decided that the format of Twitter is terrible for debate of almost any kind, but especially scientific debate.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is often very complex.
Yeah.
So, but I think it has other value, but I agree 100% with that.
So then the question is, what is the best venue for that kind of debate? I haven't enjoyed Facebook either. I've left all of the various iterations and versions of SciMap, including the SciMap plus.
Oh man, how could you leave SciMap?
Actually, I don't think I left that one. I didn't leave that one.
That's my favorite one.
That's my favorite one too. It's the only one that I can take seriously.
It's a parody Facebook group for anybody who's listening.
Right.
I've left all those groups too.
Because, well, go ahead. Why did you leave them?
I was going to say I thought Facebook is a better place for dialogue and discussion.
I did too.
Than Twitter. It is better.
I
think there's no question because it's richer.
Right. Yeah, you can make more of an argument.
You can make a paragraph point, but even there, what is it? The claim that every argument on the internet eventually boils down to somebody else calling somebody Hitler.
Hitler, right?
Yeah, and now it's really Trump.
Right.
Any argument you follow long enough, and it was. Someone on there is having a serious discussion, I thought, about some scientific practice, and they started referring to me as George Bush. Now I'm sure they would have called me Donald Trump.
Did they know that you're painting portraits now?
Yeah, Bush has gone up in the public opinion.
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah.
I think maybe it was a backhanded compliment. I'm not sure.
Good.
So, and then I was like, I'm spending time writing paragraphs.
Yeah.
And some people are just really thoughtful. They'll write a really thoughtful set of comments.
Yeah.
On some issue, and I was trying to do that too.
Yeah.
I certainly emulate that approach for a scientific dialogue, and then I realized like how much time it was sucking from writing the things I actually cared
really
about.
Sucks a lot of time, and it's not clear why I'm doing it, other than I get caught in the stream. Right?
Yes,
it's like it just sucks me in, and then I have suddenly something to say. But I didn't give a shit about it like 5 minutes before. And I have all this other stuff to do. So I look at it and suddenly I'm forced to give a shit about a thing and then respond to it. Not forced, but... And I have personal failings too. I mean, I have personal... Like I get angry. Like it's really hard for me not to get angry when I read stuff in print. But I hardly ever get angry when I'm face to face with somebody.
Yeah, same.
So I don't understand what accounts for the difference.
There was this great video... I forget what it was from one of the late night TV shows, maybe the Late Show or something. And Robinson Cano, who is an all-star player for the New York Yankees, he was a free agent and he signed with Seattle, and he was coming back to New York for his first game. And so they set up this picture of him somewhere in like Manhattan on the street, and they brought like people off the street, and they said, "Are you a Yankees fan?" And people came off the street and they said, "Are you going to come to the Yankees game tonight or this weekend?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'm going to come." And they're like, "There's a picture of Robinson Cano. It's his first time back. How do you feel about him?" They're like, "Oh, I hate that guy. Such a traitor." And they said, "Now's your chance to boo him. Show him how displeased you are that he left and he sold out." And they boo this giant picture of Robinson Cano's head. And then Robinson Cano's hiding behind this picture. And he comes around, and they realize they're booing at the real person.
Oh my God,
they're face to face like we are. And then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey man, how's it going?" They give him a high five. They shake his hand.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Sorry about that. I was just playing." And it's like we are really good at humans at like booing something that's a step removed from the real person.
Representation.
Yeah.
Right.
But the moment we're interacting and we see, this is like a very primitive part of human nature too. It's like you're looking in their eye, their flesh and blood. You can see their emotional response. It's very hard for us to be mean to a person face to face.
I wonder about that in terms of, sort of what do representations of a person afford?
So there's there's this movie, forget what it's called, but it had maybe Keanu Reeves, and parts of the scene were vertical, so like a real movie.
Yeah.
And then they had parts of the movie that were filmed where I think it was Waking Life or something like that.
Oh, right.
And they looked cartoonish.
Yeah.
And so it was the actors, but they had some veneer that made them look like a cartoon.
Yeah.
And so they cut back and forth, and so someone Raymond Marr did this study in the scanner with the vertical scenes from the movie versus the cartoon scenes from the movie of the same characters.
Interesting.
It looks just like Keanu Reeves, real versus cartoon version.
Right.
And what happens, as you might predict, is all these regions of the brain involved in social cognition are just much more strongly active when you're seeing the real version of him.
Yeah.
Even though all the other stimuli are pretty carefully controlled. The voice is the same, the type of actions are the same. But the more real somebody is to you, it triggers these basic social cognitive systems in a much stronger way.
So I wonder if that suggests a couple of things, right? If we're going to be using these media, we have to know this, that there's this tendency, and sort of come up with some principles for how to approach communication through those media. The other thing is we don't use those media for some of these purposes.
Yeah.
I have colleagues, Dan Willingham, who basically is like, I'm not going to debate with anybody on Facebook or Twitter. I'm going to post my pictures of my kids to my friends and talk about birthday cakes and things.
Yeah. So I kind of do a hybrid. I decided I'm not going to debate people, but I read what they post. So I'll go read the blog post. I'll read the link to an article if it's interesting. I really appreciate that. It's super useful. And I, as much as I don't really blog that much, I read a lot of blogs, the good ones.
Yeah.
I know who has quality writing. And the problem, of course, with blogs is there's no barrier to posting.
Yeah.
So you have no curation. So eventually you learn by the reputation of the blogger what's going to be good and what's not.
Right, sure.
But I feel like now I know that landscape. And so I don't belong to SpsychMap, but I'll tune in once a week and scroll through all the posts and see if there's anything interesting that I need to know. So I appreciate those platforms even as I've removed myself from them.
Right, yeah.
And I think like that's actually made my mental health so much better and made me more productive.
No question. I've been a much happier and more productive person since I stopped engaging with that stuff.
And a better parent.
Like I'm not better husband.
Yeah, if you're getting comments at 6, 7 p.m. on your phone and someone's criticizing you publicly,
you've got to pay attention.
There's a strong desire to manage your reputation, to jump in and defend yourself.
That's right.
And that's a very basic human thing, especially if you think now in these forums, these discussion groups, 5,000 people are members, and you're thinking the whole field's watching somebody critique me, and it doesn't seem fair, or they're wrong, so I have to go on and say why.
Yeah.
It's very hard to, feed your kids dinner.
Sure.
And so by removing myself from those, I feel better. I still get all the information. And I'm a better partner, a better parent, a better mentor to my students. I have more time for them because I'm less sucked into it.
Right.
So I feel like all of the people I actually care about benefit from me having boundaries that are healthy. Well, as a scientist, I can still read any of the blogs or articles that are posted
if you want.
If I want to, if they're relevant to what I do.
Right.
So
what about you also write a fair amount for the popular audiences. So you've written for like Scientific American and New York Times and places like that. How does that fit into this sort of broader ecosystem of communication?
So there's multiple things, and this is part of the reason I'm a defender of public communication on blogs is that I feel like part of what we do as scientists, a lot of it is funded by the government.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have an obligation to give back to the public.
Uh-huh.
I also know that public scientific literacy is remarkably low. So it's easy to think of like a lot of myths about the brain, right? We use 10% of our brain. There's left brain and right brain people.
That's right.
Teachers there's different learning styles.
Right.
And so scientifically, so many of these things have been debunked.
Yeah.
And so if we know something that's going on, we have, I think if we do research in that area, we have a responsibility to share those insights with the public.
Yeah, sure.
There's always a fine line where you start to oversell, because there's a separate set of reward structures there.
Writing in those media,
But I will say part of the reason I like to write in the public, I've written about my own work, and part of the reason I do that for the public is I had this really funny experience with a press release. So when I started as a young faculty member, my advisor, Will Cunningham, has never done a press release in his life.
Yeah.
So he just has disdain for that stuff. Which I respect.
Will.
But I remember seeing a bunch of my other colleagues doing it. And I remember reading an article saying, like, if you get press coverage of a paper, it increases academic citations by 15 or 20%. So I thought, this is part of like the dissemination of the article process.
I've done press releases.
Yeah, so I did a few as a junior faculty member, and I thought they went well. It wasn't like the press properly represented the work when it was covered. It didn't get a ton of coverage, but the coverage was good. But then I went to do a press release for one of my students' papers, and I like our press office people here, but they sent back what they were going to do for the press release to myself and my student. And I said, look it over, Leor, let me know what you think. Is this accurate representation of our work before we approve this? And he came to my office and he said, they quoted me here, but I never met with the guy. So like I didn't do an interview yet. I'm quoted as if I did an interview.
Wow.
And he's like, is this normal for press releases? And then I looked at the quotes for me, and I wasn't looking carefully at those. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like something I would say. I don't remember what I said for my one-on-one, but that doesn't sound like me.
Wow.
And so I realize what they're doing is they're filling in the blanks, and they're hoping you just approve or you'll edit it.
Yeah.
And they're trying to enrich it with quotes, even if they haven't spoken to you. But at that point, I decided
that takes it a little far.
It felt a little too far. So I think in the last 5 years, I've done one press release. But for the most part now, what I decided I'm more comfortable with is writing an op-ed in like 750 or 1,000 words, which is just a longer abstract.
Right.
And if it's interesting to the public, I'll write it for the public. If it's more for scientists, I might write it for Scientific American.
Yeah.
And so for some articles, maybe a handful of articles, I've done that. And I like it because I
you
can
just submit them? What?
well, you contact an editor there.
An editor?
At first, you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know who's who, but
yeah.
Eventually I learned who the people were at these places. That's how the press office helps me now. Here's the person to contact there.
Perfect.
And then you send a few sentences and they'll tell you if they're interested or not. And then you write it, and there's a lot of back and forth as they have their audience, and you want to make sure that it's rigorous. And I have to say, when I've written those, the best compliment that I can get, because you get crazy emails. I've gotten hate mail and all kinds of crazy stuff.
I've been down that road too. We've gotten some press in the past.
Yeah. So I've gotten hate mail. If you go to my office door, there's a bunch of like postcards from like the Unabomber on my wall, basically, about all the stuff he hates of mine. So I wear that like a bit of a badge of honor. But the stuff I really love is I had a senior colleague who said, I read this. I hadn't read your article, but I read this. And I liked it. And another colleague said, I'm going to use this in a class I'm teaching.
Yeah,
this is great.
That's
and
nice.
Another colleague at NIH said, I'm going to create an infographic and use this to educate about implicit bias here. So it's when my colleagues who are scientists see it and they think this is a great distillation of what we know. One person, a senior colleague at Columbia, emailed me, and I don't think he's read anything of mine. And he said, you wrote this with a lot of integrity. And what I took that to mean was that it actually kept to the science, but made it accessible.
That's a real skill, dude.
And so to me,
that's hard to pull off.
That's exactly what I try to aim for.
Yeah.
Is not stretch the science in any way that's untrue, but make it interesting, connect it to broader issues.
Right.
And so that's kind of the sweet spot I end up aiming for.
Yeah.
Because I do know I cringe if I have a colleague and they write something for the New York Times and they just make categorical claims.
Yep.
And I'm just like, you just can't do
that.
Well,
what's really instructive to me about hearing what you're doing is that I realize I've sort of responded to press about my own work kind of helplessly. Like, I'm just like, I didn't, I talked to them for a half an hour on the phone and now it's completely out of my control.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel that way. And that sort of sets up this sort of antagonistic kind of...
And people often feel burned by... When you talk to my colleagues, they had a bad press write-up of something. They had an interview for half an hour.
Right.
They pulled... The journalist pulls one quote that...
Exactly.
Out of context, and they're pissed.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me. So I really... If you write the lead piece, you kind of control the message.
The message, yeah. That's really good. I think we ought to do more of that.
So I really like that. And I feel like... what we do in our research area is interesting to human beings. And I have to say, I would always rather see any scientist I know speaking to the public than I would to see some pundit like Ann Coulter telling people about vaccinations or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So I always feel like any scientist I see, even if they're slightly untethered from the data, almost still always does a better job than whoever's going to fill that space in the newspaper or on CNN or whatever.
Well, and it strikes me that there's one thing that you said about writing something for, say, the New York Times that's different, that's pretty different from, say, writing a blog, which is the feedback and the editorial process.
Yeah, they have a lot of oversight.
The editors,
I have to say,
helpful.
Everything I've ever written with editorial oversight has gotten better.
Oh, yeah.
So I deeply appreciate that. It makes it more clear. They make sure there's quality. They do their own fact checks.
Yeah.
So they're not perfect. They have different set of standards, but it's better than just me spewing something.
Yeah.
Same with every journal article I've ever written, guaranteed has gotten better from the review process, from reviewers and editors.
I love it.
No question. Reviewers aren't perfect. Their reviews tend to be uncorrelated with other reviewers.
Right.
But there's almost always some nugget of gold in every review that you can use.
I agree.
Yeah.
Most of the time. It works out well. Every once in a while, it doesn't, and then those are the ones you remember.
Yeah, that's true.
But
the
reviewers
are 1 out of
and
10
editors are the
better.
unsung heroes. Yeah,
and that they're doing volunteer work.
Exactly.
All of them.
Yeah. All right. So, how'd you get here? What are you doing here? What in the hell? You're at New York University. You're doing this great work that's getting all these awards and blah blah and blah 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 and awards blah blah and you're writing for the New York Times now and Scientific American. Yeah, how did you where do you come from?
So you know the backstory here
a little bit. I know you're from like north of Edmonton somewhere.
I grew up in a small town, Fox Creek, Alberta.
Fox Creek, Alberta.
It was in the woods.
I didn't think people were
Alberta.
supposed to come from there. Isn't that against the law?
Yeah, I think I every time I go home, all my family and friends ask, when are you going to move back? Why would you want to stay in New York?
Why would you want to do that? You're
Yeah.
from Fox Creek.
Yeah.
We can't get a full hockey team together without you. Our curling team is dying.
Yeah, they need a skip.
Yeah, right.
So I grew up in a town of 2,000 people.
Jesus,
and it was
that gives me anxiety
there was
just
no
hearing
radio at the time.
There was no radio?
There's no radio out there. There's no movie
What
theater.
happened if you fell and hit your head or something?
Would
you just die?
There was a little hospital in town. Yeah,
Okay.
But that was...
If anybody found you,
yeah, they found you. You'd be okay.
they just find you with snow drifts collecting in your glassy eyeballs.
I had a friend on my hockey team who had too much to drink and fell asleep in a snowdrift, and we had
my
we had the
God.
bus ready next morning to
I thought
go
I was
on
joking.
to a trip on a hockey game. He didn't show up for the bus at like 7 in the morning, and someone went driving around and found him. He had fallen asleep in a snowbank. He had like hypothermia, and so that's like a joke, but it's a legitimate
my
thing,
God.
man. And we warmed him up
really
on the bus.
cold up there.
Yeah. Oh, it's cold. It's gets to about minus 40.
Yeah,
Which is
I
the
know.
point at which Fahrenheit beats Celsius. It's minus 40 is the same thing, no matter where you're from.
Did you get into Edmonton much?
Yeah,
Edmonton's a nice town.
So I went to University of Alberta. So I lived in
Uh-huh.
Edmonton for 5 years. And yeah, I liked Edmonton a lot.
So that's where you did undergrad.
So I did my undergrad, yeah. Spent a lot of time at West Edmonton Mall.
And what'd your parents do?
My parents, my stepdad worked in the oil field, which is
In the
why we're
oil
in Fox
field.
Creek. Yeah.
Right, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
the oil fields of Alberta.
So that was
the
my
famous.
That's what got me through college, man. Working in the oil
Really?
field in the
You
the
worked
summers.
in the summers.
Yeah.
So your dad, what did he do? Was he like a chemist or something? What was he?
No, he was the warehouse guy.
He was the warehouse guy.
Yeah.
What does
and,
that mean? What did he do?
Like he would order in supplies and chemicals and stuff.
like a foreman or something, or
Yeah. I mean, he was a manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom worked for Fish and Wildlife. So she worked for the Alberta government.
nice.
So
Doing what?
She was like the receptionist
Uh-huh.
at the Fish and Wildlife office.
Were they college
Administrative work.
educated folks? Were they?
No, so I'm the first person in my entire family, I think, in any branch to get a college degree.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
High five.
So that helped open up opportunities. That was my mom who pushed me to go because
Really?
she had gone
She-
to college and had to drop out because her family. I think her dad had a business.
Were they
Oh,
from
if it
Fox
went
Creek?
bankrupt. Yeah.
Wow. So you were second generation Fox Creek at least.
Yeah. Fox Creek turns 50 this year. So
50?
it's only 50 years old. And I'm turning 39. So, yeah. My mom was like first generation Fox Creek.
Dang. The founders.
Yeah.
So you went to University of Alberta in Edmonton.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat. I like Edmonton. You know, I think I told you, my father's side of the family is vastly Canadian, right? So we moved to Canada when I was 7, and I was there till about 9. We lived in Lethbridge, Alberta.
Yeah, it's not that far from
Not
Edmonton.
that far. Yeah. We go up there every now and then. Go to Calgary more often.
Yeah, Calgary's close.
Yeah.
So, I lived in Edmonton for 5 years. So I'm like a diehard Edmonton Oilers fan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were too. Although we had our Lethbridge team as well.
Yeah.
And I started playing hockey, right away.
Same here when I was a kid.
I remember just playing goalie because I couldn't skate.
Oh, I was a goalie too, yeah,
Oh,
because I
man.
couldn't skate.
Because I couldn't skate, and my parents had got me these ice skates that were too small, and I just my dominant memory of hockey in Canada is just like frozen toes crunched up against the metal of the ice skates and just torture.
Mine was as I got up and I became a better goalie, I played for the men's team, and I was like the underage player, and I got a hockey puck, a slap shot, so hard in my face in the mask that shattered my teeth in the middle of the hockey
God,
game.
it shattered your teeth?
Yeah, so these teeth were like, it was in some random small town in rural
You
Alberta.
were traveling around.
We had to like call
You're
the
on the
dentist
B team
in.
or the A team
It
or
was
something.
like, it was like traveling in the middle of the night, like a Friday night, to call the dentist to come into like his office and like give me some gas and like an impromptu root canal in the middle of the night.
I'm going to go ahead and nominate that for Canadian Story of the Year. Yeah. That's a very Canadian story.
You're not Canadian
the only
unless
thing
you
to
lost
make it
your
more
teeth.
Canadian is that you lost your teeth because a moose kicked you.
Okay, let me tell you my moose story.
You have a moose story. Okay, here goes.
First year of college, I was almost killed by a moose.
You were?
Yeah,
They're mean motherfuckers.
they're mean and big.
Yeah.
So I was my first year of college, and my girlfriend was in grade 12, so she was 1 year younger than me. So I was coming back to Fox Creek to hang out with my girlfriend on the weekend. I was in the passenger side of the front seat of the car. My friend Terrell was driving.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in the front, I'm reading an Archie comic, because that's what I read back then. And all of a sudden, she kind of gasps. I look up, there's this moose walking across the road. And we were going too fast.
So you're going to hit
the
moose.
We hit it head on.
Oh, my God.
And the problem with hitting a moose...
What kind of car were you driving?
Just a small little white car.
A little white car?
Yeah, it was totaled. Like it's a write-off.
What kind of car is a white... Like, what was
I don't
it, like
know
a
what
Datsun
it was.
or something?
Like a Datsun or something. And no, people who haven't lived around moose don't know this. If you hit a deer, almost every car is high enough, it will hit the deer in the body.
Yeah,
so
I've hit a deer before.
Yeah, so you hit a deer and it goes down.
Did a lot of damage.
It does damage to the car, but it will never almost go into the windshield.
Right.
A moose is so tall that what happens when you hit it is you take out the legs and its huge body collapses on the hood of the car.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and so I know people who've been like scalped because it came down, the moose came down and like cut off the top of their head and
oh my God.
And crazy things. So it came down, it smashed on the windshield and I ducked, but I had a huge cut all the way down the side of my face, down to my neck. And I was like this close. I'm probably inches away from getting
like
decapitated. Yeah,
artery or something.
Yeah, or getting my neck cut off. So I was fine.
Don't go to Canada, folks.
Yeah.
That's the rule.
Yeah, that's
don't go to Canada unless you're there with body armor.
Yeah,
because the moose will get you.
Yeah. So that was my moose story.
That's a good story.
Yeah, it's like, and it's true. When you almost die, everything slows down.
It's really true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's stuff. That's no fun. So you go to University of Alberta. What are you getting your degree in psychology?
So I have this story where I went to be a criminology major. So I had to start in psychology. Because you're gonna start cops. Well, what I wanted to do was be a probation officer in Northern Alberta. I was hoping I'd go get my degree, come back to Grand Prairie or somewhere in Northern Alberta.
That's be a pro-social kind of thing to do.
It was because I was hooked on all those shows like X-Files and Silence of the Lambs. And so I thought,
so you want to be a probation officer?
Yeah, it was like I wasn't ambitious enough yet to go for a forensic psychologist.
Yeah.
So I applied to transfer the forensic or the criminology program 2 years in a row, and I didn't get in.
You didn't?
I got rejected both my first 2 years of college.
You were a shitty student.
I was a mediocre student. I was like above average, but not great.
Okay.
And I didn't have enough experience.
Yeah.
Other students like volunteered at police offices and stuff. And so it was really a story of failure that landed me
in psychology.
Yeah. So then
It's not just the way it goes.
I was also no one in my family had graduated college or university.
Right.
So it wasn't until my third year I ended up doing this internship at this long-term care center and I was on the research side with doing research on Alzheimer's.
At University of Alberta?
In Edmonton, at University of Alberta. So I took a year off college. They had this internship program. You could get research experience or practical experience. I wanted to work, again, like in a hospital doing research, like with, forensic psychology type of stuff. And I applied for those jobs and did interviews and didn't get it. And I applied for a job at a probation office that I was volunteering at and didn't get it. So I ended up getting this Alzheimer's research job. And that was when I got introduced to research. And that was my third year of college. And I will say, before then, I didn't know where research came from. I literally...
Right. How does research happen?
I would just read a textbook and it's all these things.
Smart people know.
Yeah.
Working their white plastic machines somewhere.
And I had never questioned it. I had never asked, where is this research coming from? I was at one of the biggest research universities in Canada. I had no idea that my professors who were teaching me did research. I just thought they taught.
Yeah, created original knowledge.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
And it wasn't until I did that internship I started to learn what a PhD was and how research happens. And then I went back and
Did you learn about tenure?
No, I didn't know about tenure yet. It took me about 2 more years.
I remember when I learned about tenure, I was like, what are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Are you shitting me?
Yeah. I have a great story. I was on the phone with one of my best friends from high school, and he's a police officer in Edmonton City Police. And I was telling him about my sabbatical. So I'm on sabbatical right now. I just got tenure. I'm at a private research institute, the Russell Sage Foundation.
Right.
And every day I have to take the subway in and I have to check in. They do attendance. I have to be there 75% of the days of the year, or they're going to like dock they're covering part of my pay. So
good.
But all you have to do is go in and have lunch. That's the requirement. You go in, you have lunch, and they serve you. They have on-staff chefs.
I did something like this in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Same kind of thing. They took attendance.
Yeah, they take attendance because they're paying part of your salary. But you don't have to do anything. You just have to go hang out and be part of the intellectual
That sounds
environment.
good.
And so this sounds awesome, right? But I was whining about it because, as you know, I have a 5-minute walk to work.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's a half hour there, half hour back.
Yeah,
And so I was kind of complaining to my friend, I got to go in, I got to take a half-hour subway, have lunch, and then I can come home. And he looks, I'm on Skype with him, and he looks at me like I'm crazy. He's like, so you're telling me that someone's paying your salary for you to come in, for them to have chefs make you lunch, and then you go home?
Yeah.
And he was like,
I'm going to kick your
Yeah,
ass.
he's like, why? He's like, I'm going to kick your fucking ass. Why are you complaining about this? And I was like, oh yeah. Like I have
Yeah,
right.
I'm doing nothing for all the people in my family that think that I have the cushiest job in the world right now.
Yeah. So that's the tenure thing. Yeah. But I have to say, as you know, it's like you're still swamped with reviews and papers and mentoring and lab
it's
meetings.
True. And in the assistant professor years, it's no cakewalk.
Yeah.
So when do you go to grad school?
So I took a year off, and this was kind of a turning point for me. The year after I graduated, I worked for a nonprofit against racism.
Uh-huh.
And so we did research on racism in the education system. And I'd had to go to high schools. And we had to give talks to like grade 10, grade 11 kids about prejudice, racism, sexism. And we did like skits and then had conversations. And it was fun, but it was also deeply disheartening because you hear these kids and how racist they were.
Oh, yeah.
And the ideas they had gotten from their parents and these
Yeah.
things.
That's no good.
And then that's what hooked me, I think, and really made it clear to me I needed to study groups and prejudice.
Yeah, you really have too.
Yeah.
You really, I mean, that's like right in your wheelhouse.
I'm still at it.
Yeah.
So that was the turning point. So I worked also for government that year on the research end, but it wasn't doing research I was passionate about. And so I got to the University of Toronto, and I worked with Ken Dion. And he was a kind of a senior intergroup relations faculty member. He was about 60. And we hit it off. He was a fantastic mentor. And then after I defended my thesis, I met with him to design a follow-up study, like 4 p.m. We settled on the materials. And then he went home and had a heart attack like an hour after I saw him.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And
Oh, no. I'm
died.
really sorry to hear that.
Oh, it was I mean, it was awful. It was, I mean, I was basically effectively kind of like orphaned. And then I ended up being lucky professionally because Will Cunningham, he had just arrived.
Yeah.
And
I love that guy.
Yeah. And
man.
I met him on his first day as a faculty member.
Yeah.
I knew he was coming because we had hired him and he took a year time to finish his postdoc before he came. And so months before he came, I had emailed him and said, I'd love to do my outside project with you.
Uh-huh.
And so literally the first day that he arrived was July 1st. It was like a holiday.
Uh-huh.
And he wanted to meet on day one because he's Will.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a key to the office. It was a Saturday or something. The university
Did
was
you
closed.
want to go for a walk?
He wanted to go for a walk and meet me for lunch. So I met him at the department. He didn't have a key. And he just said, let's go grab a bite. This is Will. He wanted to go walk around, get a bite. He had just moved in.
He's a walker.
And I had 3 ideas picked out that I was going to pitch him because I wanted to do a project with him. And I thought, he's like, Will has this pedigree. He's from Yale and all these fancy places.
I know, he's fancy.
And I was like an Alberta boy. Like these are like places in movies, right?
Right.
And so I met him for lunch and I had these 3 ideas, A, B, and C. And I pitched him A and he loved it. And I was like, okay, we're good.
Done.
And so I already was working with him and he offered me to join his lab and I became his first or second student, depending on how you slice it. And then a year later, he got an offer to go to Ohio State. So I moved with him to Ohio State and I had a fellowship from the Canadian government that I could take. So I was still a Toronto student.
Oh, that's good.
And I could just hang out at Columbus.
Oh, I see.
And
so you remained a student of the University of Toronto working out of Columbus.
Yeah. So
That's
I
a good
spent
deal.
3 years at Toronto and 3.5 at Ohio State. So it was kind of like a really short PhD, a really long postdoc kind of.
Yeah.
And so I went there with them. And the fun story was that since I was still a Toronto student, I still had to do all my comprehensive exams, my dissertation proposal, my dissertation defense. And so the only time, and all my committee was Toronto faculty, other than Will, who retained just kind of an affiliation to mentor me. I had to meet my committee at SPSP each year at the conference, in the conference hotel. So it's the only time we'd all get together in the same place.
That's creative problem solving.
So I remember doing my defense, and I'm in the lobby of the hotel, and so there's all these other prominent people, famous people in my field surrounding me on couches, kind of just off us, and I'm getting grilled by my committee. And I remember they asked me a question about social identity theory. And right behind my advisor was Dominic Abrams, one of the top people. And one of my committee members said, what's the future of social identity work? Like trying to probe how much I know, how
it's appropriate.
The normal question. And I have to say, I know more about social identity than any of my committee members. That's like a softball question.
Yeah,
at that time.
Yeah. You're going to destroy
So
that
she's
question.
like, give me a softball question. And I was so anxious of misstating it and having Dominic Abrams overhear me and turn and say, no, that's not right, that I froze. I panicked.
Nice.
So I thought that would be devastating.
Everybody's got to have a panic story.
So I had this panic.
Oh, shit. Sorry, dude.
The thing ended, and I walked away, and they came back.
Well, wait, what did you do when you were panicking? Did you wet your pants?
I
or what did you
stumbled.
Did
Here's
you
what I
say
did.
anything?
We had tea set up. I had brought over tea for everybody from like the bar or whatever. And have you ever put lemon and milk in your tea at the same time, and it all curdles, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to put lemon or milk in your tea.
Right.
I ended up putting both in my tea. And so I had this tea with all this curdled milk in it. And I'm trying not to show that I'm anxious, so I'm drinking it. I'm drinking this tea with this curdled milk, and I'm probably sweating and panicking. And I mumbled my way through it, trying not to say anything that would be seen as idiotic. And then I went away, and they came back and they said, you nailed the whole thing, but you stumbled on what we thought was the easiest question. We don't, have you read that literature? And then by then Abrams was gone, and I told them all what had happened because they didn't know he was in there right behind them.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. So.
But you got your PhD?
So I got my PhD
successfully.
Passed it. Yeah.
Did you get a job here right away?
I got a job here right away. So I was really lucky.
That's
how hard that job market is.
Pretty good story.
The other thing about the job market was that I was on the job market the year that the economy crashed. And so I remember applying to jobs. It's my first year of my postdoc. I stayed at Ohio State. And I remember getting these emails from I applied to Columbia, and it's like, we've canceled our search. All these places started, about a third of the jobs just got canceled because that was when the economy was just absolutely cratering.
Yeah, right.
And then I ended up getting this offer at NYU. And I remember being just so grateful that I got anything because... And then the job market in our world was terrible for 5 years after.
I know.
And you had a backlog of people
brutal.
with 3, 4, 5 years of postdoctoral experience who would have got jobs in the previous years now competing against new graduate students. And so we're finally out of it. But I mean, I was lucky that I got it when I did. I feel so grateful.
And now here you are. You just got tenure.
Yeah.
So congratulations, man.
And that's all downhill from here, man.
Oh, that's right. Well, it's all just putting your feet up, watching TV now, drinking beer. Nothing to it.
And we had
just eating some lunch,
some beer last night. I can finally read the paper again.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking to me, man. That was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, that's it. Thanks to Jay Van Bavel for an altogether enjoyable conversation. I hope you liked it as much as I did. You probably didn't, but that's only because it's hard to compete with me for how much I like things. You know what? If you liked what you heard, I'm going to go ahead and do something now that I've never done before, which is recommend that you follow Jay on Twitter. You can find him with the Jay Van Bavel handle there, all one word. Or you can just do a search for him. I don't know how to tell you how to find him, but you'll find him if you want. I don't follow too many people on Twitter. As you heard just now, Twitter kind of freaks me out. But Jay does a nice job of being relevant to a broad audience, from working scientists to science journalists, and even to the average. I don't know exactly what I want to say right now. Let's say the average Twitter user. Point is, you'll like it. I think that will be particularly true if you're a young scholar, as Jay has been full of good mentoring of late on that platform. In any case, Jay, thanks, man. That was a lot of fun, and I hope it was at least fun enough for you to be willing to do it again. Folks, the music on Circle of Willis was written by Tom Stauffer and Gene Ruley and performed by their band, The New Drakes. For information on how to purchase their music, check the About page at circleofwillispodcast.com. Don't forget that Circle of Willis is brought to you by VQR and the Center for Media and Citizenship at the University of Virginia, and that Circle of Willis is a member of the Teej FM network. You can find out more about that at teej.fm. If you like this podcast, give us a review at iTunes. Let us know how we're doing. It's easy, and we like it. Or send us an email by going to circleofwillispodcast.com and clicking on the Contact tab. In any case, I'll see you at episode 13, where I talk with Nilanjana Dasgupta, professor of psychological and brain sciences at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. We talk about the conditions that affect the likelihood that women and minorities stick with or leave the STEM disciplines during college. It's important work, and I can't wait for you to hear about it. Until then, bye-bye.